Hey everybody, it's Eric Balance coming to you with the Resilient Minds podcast, where I feature beautiful entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and experts in their field, where they help us discover their X factor, their experience of life, only to discover how they were able to accomplish and find out their Y factor, their big why, their purpose in life. So join me as we get to discover the beauty of our minds and how can we really continue to go after the biggest and most wildest dreams while we continue to pursue and manifest our greatest intelligence that comes from the heart. Also, if you haven't, go check out the new alignment course that I've created at www.ericbalance.com/alignment, ALIGNMENT. See you on the show. Welcome everybody to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm super excited to welcome here today with us Christina Dam. And honestly, Christina, I want to know, where are you right now? Because I just heard an amazing garbage truck in the background.
Well, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm actually in my house, but it's garbage day. The modern civilization duties, right? So if you keep on hearing it, they come by one at a time. It's like the green truck, the blue truck, then the black truck, and so.
Hey, at least they're doing that. When I lived in Spain, they just they told us to separate everything, and then they just put everything into one thing all the time. So it was like pointless.
Oh.
It made no sense.
Yeah, absolutely not.
So for everybody that's listening and tuning in, you guys, I'm really excited. Christina Dam, she's an amazing hypnotherapist, healer, motivator, leader with a longing desire to cultivate positive change by holding a creative and healing space for transformation. What's this space called again?
Liberate Yourself, which is actually the same name of my new book, Liberate Yourself. Very creative.
I love it. I love it. And here we are. It's interesting because on the Resilient Minds, we are talking about how are we taking our experience, our X factor, and really bringing that into our Y, our biggest Y factor, and cultivating that around the communities, the families, the cultures, the organizations that we're really spreading ourselves. So liberating yourself, it's a huge kind of emergence of bringing that together. So I'm really excited to talk deeper about your book. But first and foremost, I'd love to know more about Christina. I'd love to know what encouraged you, got you excited. What was that big X factor that told you, say, hey, I need to get fully committed to this mission and get excited about following that purpose and knowing that this was yours?
Well, I think it's actually something that was, some people are just built with this knowing from like a smaller age. It was one of those things that even as a child, like I always like dreamed of what else can be created and what can do. And I always hated people suffering. I wanted to make changes. I was even vice president of my middle school and student body president, and like I in those times I was like, what changes can I make, what impact can I shift on people? And then you're a traveling guy, and I grew up pretty poor, and I never got a chance to travel. And I always dreamed of, I grew up in the Midwest, and I always dreamed of palm trees, something tropical. It was those things that you've seen in movies, these beautiful beaches, these wonderful trees. And one of my best friend's parents got me this palm tree necklace. And I said, okay, when I'm able to, I'm going to move to somewhere, with a palm tree. And so that's what led me to Los Angeles. And then I checked out Florida for a minute, and then I ended up back in Los Angeles. But the driving factor of how can I shift, how can I help, how can I heal? And, I'm sure that it ties in a little bit to, I grew up in a large family. So I have 6 siblings, but the sibling that's right above me in age, her name's Tony, and she has dissociative identity disorder. But, we didn't know this in the beginning, and that's a very rare diagnosis. It's not something that is really common. People think about the movies like Civil and stuff like that, or hear about it, but you're talking about, maybe a couple hundred diagnoses that happen annually. It's very, very rare to be diagnosed with that. But I didn't know this growing up, and I just knew something was always off, right? And the tension and the things that caused and the ripple effect. And so I studied psychology, and I went and got my master's in psychology. And then I was like doing, one of those things where
I just want to know a little bit, because I want you to expand on dissociative disorder, because for
okay.
those that are listening, because I am also super curious about understanding this, because my sister also has bipolar. And
Okay.
I think that, I'm self-diagnosed bipolar. I don't know, maybe I have it too, but just because I love to like really create, and I know that this is a moment of genius that I have, and then there's moments
Yeah.
of external doubt. And so I think that, there's an experience of all of us having these, what are so-called disorders or
Yeah.
diseases, but I don't think that they're so negative that society has actually conditioned most people to believe. So I'd love for you, from your words and your perspective, really maybe first say what it means to you and what society has kind of communicated that as.
Yeah. So, there's a couple things that kind of get stirred up. So with my sister with dissociated identity disorder, most people know that as multiple personalities. And so there's a fractional, like on like more clinical level, there's like a fraction of identity, this fractalation that happens in a person. And normally when they have a few, they have many. So my sister has 6 identified majors and 36 minor personalities. Now her handwriting changes, other body postures changes. She likes to be called by different names and that, but she's, it's sad because, most of the times what happens with this is there's an inability to process some kind of event that happens in life, and that in that inability to process and cope, then the separation. So it's really sad that our society just says, let's drug people, there's something wrong with them. And, when maybe, this is their genius coping mechanism, and there can be a reintegration of, alters in that case. Now with bipolar, it's very interesting how frequently that is diagnosed, because we live in a world with seasons, right? For the most part. I mean, some areas you don't have too much seasons, but there's an ebb and flow in life. And it's interesting when people have these more highs and more lows, like it suddenly seemed as something that's completely abnormal and it shouldn't happen, but yet there's a winter and there's a summer. So I was saying that there's times when it's natural that people like yourself need to go into yourself, kind of have those reflective thoughts, and maybe that can be seen as more depressive or more dark or whatever the case may be. But it is what it is. And then there's the light, and there's the expression in the full bloom, in the summer, and we have that. And if we looked at that as more normal to have this, we just try to not be in sequence with our harmonious.
Well, I think that
nature.
this is the key. And I think that this is the key is, if we really spend some time and realize that, hey, the bipolar, like misrepresentation of what that, this persona of negativity that has been created, especially as I was growing up, and how that really was projected into society and onto me and my family and through my sister and everything like this. I really realized that, hey, like, fuck, we're all bipolar, and maybe more of us should be, because if we take the time to go inside and we do the work on ourselves, then perhaps we will create this other part of ourselves that's super expressive and has the power, the might, the strength to step into that second polarity that allows you, because the contrast is so freaking important. And if we're not willing to go inside, how can we go and really express outside? And so to me, I think, because, and you know this just as well as I do, we've been raised in a society that had conditioned us based off of fear, and that we're not enough, and lack mindset and scarcity. And like you and me and thousands of our friends, are like, fuck that, no more. We're here, we believe in abundance, and we're going to help each other, and we're going to navigate in a way that's going to create change because we believe in it so wholeheartedly. We want to look after each other as a collective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head of like the conditioning and 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 also the aspect of, besides like the negativity and the fear and all of that, it's also this disassociated world that we live in. People, and more so now today than ever before, with distractions of social media and all this other stuff, like we just, it's hurry up, do. It's like people aren't expected to have an off day. People are expected to have to return to a message or an inbox within, 30 minutes, right? And it's just crazy. It's like, where's the time to feel? And if more people allowed themselves to feel, one, they could process and go through it. What is that dark moment? What is that inward reflection? It's the ability to process, right? And out of processing, you grow. And without the ability to process, you stagnate yourself.
This is, I think, maybe part, and allow me to say, is like, maybe this dissociative disorder that your family member, your sister, relates to. My curiosity is like, maybe she's mirroring back what she sees in the world, and it's being expressed because she's such a clear mirror. She's such a clear
Mm-hmm.
mirror that literally that clarity has allowed her to resonate and reflect back the bullshit that she's seeing around her.
Yeah.
Just curiosity. This is something that you see. None of us, I think, can answer. The best person that can answer this question is, through deep conversation and talk with your sister. But I'm curious to know, is like, is it possible that this level of clarity, when we're willing to show up in our worst forms or our best forms, that there's mirrors out there like your sister that can actually reflect back in such precision what they see? And this is the
Yeah.
actual purest sense of soul that can give brilliance back to the human understanding, because they're able to cultivate and mirror back the image and the emotion and the connection at such a beautiful reflection that gives us clarity to see ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that throughout history, there was, individuals that allowed themselves to be those channels that were perceived as insane, but then they've created some of the most genius works ever. I mean, look at Nicholas Tesla. I mean, in his dying age, he was, fell in love with a pigeon, right? And that was like, when he passed, he was living in his place with in love with a pigeon, right? But how much genius was he able to take in and then source, right? And oftentimes when you're talking about that, oftentimes I've seen, like in Los Angeles, we have such a homeless population, and a lot of them have mental illness. And there's a difference between having mental illness that is drug induced, and there's literally receptors of your brain, and then there's mental illness where it's you know where it's something that maybe they're just this channel like you're talking about. And but some of the wisdom that comes out, if you've ever taken time to like talk to somebody, and you can perceive it as these schizophrenic delusions or schizoaffective disorder, but then like a lot of the stuff makes sense. A lot of the things that are being talked about, it's just that there's this inability to integrate back into society. So there's this openness of this channel, but this inability to express it in a way that the rest of society has deemed acceptable, right? Or to operate, and I think that's that switch that is lost, but it's fascinating when you hear, I was working on like doing a documentary type style TV show a few years ago. It didn't end up getting picked up, but it was called Another Chance. And I was going around interviewing homeless people. And, the whole premise of the TV show was, we all have times of struggle from here and there, but most of us have a support network to pick us up. What happens to those that don't, and to rehumanize homeless and say, if they're given another chance, they can integrate, it's just they didn't have another chance, right? So anyways, that's neither here nor there. That's another little project, but
I think that this is actually really beautiful because, we talk about illness, but I really think that there's what if we started creating mental wellness?
Yeah.
And this is a new perspective because, I'm working on a project called Wellness 3. And this
Okay.
Wellness 3, it's a life guide platform for mental wellness, through the virtual world, as well as emotional intelligence and physical well-being. And it's interesting because inside of this platform, we work on the 5 dimensions of really cultivating better health. And through these better health components, we're allowing individuals to have better sleep, right? Better nutrition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Better understanding of themselves, better discovery of the world around them, and most importantly, the environment. And so the environment that they want to put themselves in is oftentimes something that they don't know much about. But if they could put themselves into a virtual environment that allows them to really breathe and connect, and put them into a state of absolute certainty that they're in peace, what can change into mental wellness? How can it really be evolved? And are we able to really transform the state of being of so many individuals around the world that actually need it, allowing them to actually take part in experiences or physical events that maybe they couldn't partake in Egypt or Dubai or Tulum or Ibiza, but they could put on the virtual goggles and really immerse themselves into this like really creative experience that connects them back to their bodies, back to their breath, and through the sound, through the iteration, through the music. And this is something that I really believe that is going to change the dynamics of not just individuals that are living on the street, but it's going to change the trend. Like, what does corporate culture look like? How does organizational culture start to transform? What does the human dynamic really want to evolve to? And, I am always fascinated, and I say this with tremendous compassion, although maybe some also a little bit like anger. Compassion, anger, I don't know how that works, but whatever. I think that to me, it's fascinating that there's 40-50 million people that don't have healthcare inside of a country that has so much abundance, and that's been cultivated. So to me, this is it's almost like there's a first world or third world country inside of a first world society, and it blows my mind. And so I think that there's a really huge responsibility that us as future leaders really have. And we can continue to cultivate that by just having the conversation, by just being willing to say, hey, why is this happening? Because I think all the tools, actually, I know all the tools, all the generation, all the abundance, it all exists. So the only thing that's lacking is the leadership.
Leadership and the ability to change what societal norms are, and I think that it's starting though, that we have to say, there's a lot of work that needs to happen, but you do see like a lot of companies taking the initiative, places like Google and other things like that they're like, okay, company culture, 4-day work weeks. Let's have a day where you do volunteer work, 1 day of your work week. Like you see these, some of these bigger, Fortune 100 companies are starting to get the gist of it. It's just that this ripple effect needs to start to translate down, and it's great that they're doing it, but people in the mindset, like I'm sure that you've come across this before, but I mean, the number one problem with anybody and definitely that filters into society, is their inability to be their self. And then we're conditioned, and then we're told, and then we're unfortunately or fortunately, we're these pactual beings. The good thing about that is that we strive in community, and we can't create anything by ourselves, and this is supposed to be this communal effort. And the bad thing about that is it creates this innate conditioning that is done, in our society and many societies in the world, the wrong way. And that is this, it leaves people with this ability to impress, this ability to want to care more about what somebody else thinks or says than their self. And then they're somewhere along one impression and the next, they've lost their self, and they don't know what it is that really makes them happy, or they're embarrassed, or they're ashamed if they have a breakdown, or they can't process their emotions right, or whatever the case may be. And, it's like, well, if we bring people back to say, okay, this is you, the 7.6 billion people on the planet, you're uniquely you. You're not supposed to be anybody else. So what is it that makes your heart sing? Who are you? What is your unique qualities and characteristics about your personality? What are the positive attributes? And to be honest, what are the things that you struggle with? Because those are the coolest things about you, right? And everything in between. And I think we need people like you creating this Web3 program and the different stuff, because it's like, okay, let's teach people how to be their self again. And I think that to some people, it's like, well, that's common, I'm me, but you're not you. For the most part, you're not. You're this conditioned factor. And like, sometimes when I like work with individuals, I had one client, we worked on like developing and getting his core issue out of him. The guy was working on his 4th PhD. His wound was he didn't feel he was smart enough. So this core issue of not feeling smart enough caused him to continue to chase PhD after PhD to try to prove to himself that he was smart enough, but he never believed he was smart enough. He pulled that out, and he didn't even want to be a professor anymore, because it wasn't what he really wanted. That was just his coping mechanism of a wound that manifested, right?
Interesting.
And it's like that kind of stuff happens for so many people. We get into certain relationships, we get into certain careers, we do certain things, and some of it is from a wound, some of it is to please, and then you pull it out, you let you be yourself, and they're like, oh, well, I never wanted this.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't what I want. This isn't the life I would have designed for myself.
And because you're trying to rescue, I think sometimes other people. And so my actually, this is a really good point that you bring up, because this gentleman, that has his fourth PhDs, what do you feel, when he had to like almost go out there and prove himself to himself, because he's not needing to prove it to anybody else. But I think that he's actually looking for the validation from the external world, not recognizing that he just needs to validate his own like brilliance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes from, in my work and working with thousands of people over the years in groups and individuals, like I find that it kind of boils down to, most people have a core issue. Sometimes they could have a couple, but it's this event. You think that the world revolves around you when you're a little kid, and you think everything's perfect and your needs are met. And even sometimes if your needs aren't met to a certain extent, you're, if you're living and breathing, right? And then there's an incident that happens that shatters your reality. And in that moment, you make it mean something about you. And when you make it mean something about you, that becomes this deep-seated wound. And for the rest of your life, you see the world as you are and not as it is. And so you're creating a filter system, and you're going around and you're constantly validating that wound. But the interesting irony in that is you so desperately want to heal that wound, but you go about it the wrong way. And you're constantly then doing the things that, would, try to show that, if somebody feels that they're a mistake and that they have this wound, maybe they're a people pleaser and they're going around and they're trying to, but they never feel like they're included. Maybe they don't end up showing up at weddings or parties or different things like that because they don't feel like they're ever wanted, right? And they might continuously try to do the things to say, I want love, I want to show that I want it, I want to do these things. Or like in this guy's example, if he felt that he was stupid, everything in his life was built around trying to prove that he was smart, even having this false sense of arrogance about him, of that he was the know-it-all. But deep down inside, I mean, we've been around people that, you know, boaster and they name drop, or they do these different things so that they can feel important, but we see right through them. We know that they're insecure. But the same thing is true of the people that are witty or smart or perceive themselves to be humble, but really are they, you know, or is it run by this wound that is activating them? And so it's very interesting. But once it's pulled out, the ripple effect is crazy that happens in people's lives, because now they're free, they're liberated, they have the ability to do what, you know, when we were talking a little bit before we got onto the started the live, when you said, you know, you found yourself, you found that heaven inside of you, and then you knew everything, you know, and you could just be that expression of you. And that is whatever I would say at that moment. From my perspective, you healed whatever wound was inside of you, and you were completely whole and free again. And so now there is no proving, there is no need, there is this ability to just be. And if everybody can have that, right? And we can all have that, but it starts with actually looking at yourself. And, you know, in a way, you don't have to look at yourself and say, I'm bad or I'm wrong or this. Is just say, okay, I'm conditioned a certain way, so let me step away from my conditioning and say, what is that wound? Okay. And then realizing that you have control over your life, and it might take some work, right? You know, if we want to get fit, if we want to suddenly run a marathon, it's going to take some work, right? But the result of finishing that marathon is going to feel so rewarding.
Yeah, yeah, it really does. And I have to say that this is, I think, the most important thing. I mean, I always say this because I think so many things are important. but but
Hey,
to
you know,
be,
there's many
yeah,
important things.
yeah, exactly. So I find that there's, you know, we want to always go change the world. And I know that I was this eager beaver and wanting to go change the world 5 years ago when, you know, I ran into Tony Robbins. And I realized that the only thing that I really ever, like today, you know, last year, you know, like this, over the past, like the only thing that I really needed to ever change was my perspective, was myself.
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and when we do this, we really set ourselves free, because now everything comes from the perspective of the teacher, right? It comes from,
Mhm.
like, you see the mirror of the teacher, you're the
Yeah.
student, and you now see everything teaching you, everything is a lesson. And
Yeah.
so it gives you this openness of allowing yourself to see, hey, I see creative intelligence in everybody, because everybody is a reflection of me, and is an energy from our most eternal creator, our eternal teacher, whatever you, God, whatever you want to call it, you
Yeah.
know, whatever you want to call the source, you know, like it doesn't matter the name, but this is the most important thing. And when you discover this, you realize that heaven isn't near or there, it's right now, you know. And I
Yeah.
think that it's the most important, again.
It is. It is one of the most important things. And, you know, the reason why, you know, people have a hard time with that is they don't even realize that their perception is only one perception that is possible, right? You know, most people, they like I said a few minutes ago, they see the world as they are, but they think that that's how the world is, right? And there's, at any given moment, there's over 6 billion bits of information bombarding your senses. For all your listeners out there, you know, right now, some of you might be listening to it on an audio platform. Some of you might be tuning in on YouTube and seeing us. But what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the words? Are you focusing on what those words are making stories in your mind? But what if you took a minute and said, what about feeling your clothes? Can you feel your pants? Can you feel your shirt? Do you have a piece of jewelry? Do you notice that? What about your toes? What about the arches in your soles? Can you hear other sounds around you? If you're seeing things, what can you expand that vision just a little bigger? But what happens when you start to notice your knee? Do you still notice your toes? You know, we only have the capability as humans to take in 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information at a time. That's it. Some of us is at 5, some of us is at 9. That's it. Well, the interesting thing is the average human has 60,000 thoughts a day, and they're 98% identical from the day before, for the most part. We think the same thoughts, we think the same patterns, we do the same things. And, you know, there might be a couple different things that change. But if in this exercise of just drawing your awareness to your toes or your knee or whatnot, you realize that you can pay attention to something different. Imagine if you could see the world differently. I mean, I like to look at, like, you know, think about when you walk down the street. Why do you notice stores, restaurants? What sticks out to you when people pass by? If you're walking down the street with a friend or a lover, you probably notice different things about a group that passes by. They might say, oh, I noticed that guy, or you might say, I noticed that dog, or whatever the case may be. But you notice different things automatically. Buy a new car, do you notice that make and model everywhere you drive? It's not that you're purposely like looking for it. It just happens because it becomes something that's important to you, becomes something that's an experience to you. Now, I'm here to tell you, what if every freaking thing that the results that you have in your life are just through the filter system that you created? And just like you're saying, Eric, you can look and you can notice something different, but they have to first, anybody that's listening, you have to first realize that you have the ability to focus on something different. You have the ability to look up or take the sunglasses off and see the world brighter. Yeah. But if that doesn't happen, or if you can't even do that on a subtle level, how are you going to do it on a dramatic level? Right?
Yeah, this is beautiful. And the way that you're explaining it is very, especially the lens, right? When you're talking about the lens and the explanation, it allows, like, when I see it, it's like, hey, let's just keep taking these glasses on. It's like one lens after another, you know what I mean? Just keep it, and you can keep going. These lenses keep like getting clearer and clearer, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that I'm certain there's still so many lenses that, you know, we can all clarify, right? Or get clearer on. You know, I always say there's always another onion to peel, or layer to peel back from the onion.
And another thing that was just popping up on the perception thing, right? And your perspective and through the filters. But I think that there's not anybody that's not tuning in today that hasn't had an experience in their life that when they're going through it, it's the worst thing that could have been possible that happened. Maybe it's their first heartbreak. Oh my God, I'm never going to get over this. This is horrible. 100%. Maybe they get fired from a job. Maybe something else happens, whatever the case may be. But you have that experience. And then you fast forward. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's a couple years. And you look back and you say, wow, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Your perspective shifted. Absolutely. You know, maybe that led you to travel the world. Maybe that caused you to do this. Maybe that met somebody else that's the love of your life. Whatever the case is that helped you switch that perspective. But how can one thing be both the best thing and the worst thing? And that's because at the essence, they're neutral. It's how you choose to see it. It's your ability to see that. And then if you can do that with one thing, and you have done that before with numerous things, you can do that with whatever circumstance you're struggling with today.
Actually, this is a really good point. So going back to this and really navigating in that like 6-month perspective, right? Do you feel that people can learn how to, instead of doing this in 6 months, learn to do that in 6 minutes or 6 days?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I teach. You know, it's not that things won't stir up. It's not like you won't get disappointed by life, because we do build expectations. It's part of our genius of the ability to plan, right? You know, we had an expectation that we'd have a podcast today, and so we put it in our calendar, we planned, right? You know, and so and then you might get disappointed, or you might get let down, or you might have these reactions if something doesn't go as planned. If you're really looking forward to, I don't know, a trip to a place and your flight gets canceled, you're going to get bummed, right? You showed up at the airport and you're, but how do you reframe it? How do you change it? How do you allow it to not destroy your day, right? You know, or your life, which is what a lot of people do. They're still living on a story that happened 5 years ago, or sometimes even like 20 years ago. And I'm like, Are you still
Generations.
really bringing that past with you? Because last I checked, if like, you're moving forward, if you're driving, you don't look out the rear view mirror the whole time, right? You're supposed to look
I
forward
mean,
to go
listen,
forward.
I think this is something that so many people do unconsciously from
Yeah.
generations, right? And this
Oh,
is
of
something
course.
that
People.
allows us to really go deeper in this perspective of being able to change that into from 6 months to 6 minutes is really something that needs to be practiced. And so knowing that things are going to trigger you, are going to show up, it literally has nothing to do with things outside of us. And so my question to you is this: how can one learn how to navigate more on the internal on a regular basis and understand that it's actually from the internal that the external shows up?
It's a really good question. One of the things that I highly recommend is to learn to work the muscle of being able to mirror yourself through different perspectives, and try to do that when you aren't triggered by something, right? And so like maybe it's an irrelevant type of thing that happens and you're looking at a situation, you're hearing a friend talk about something, right? And they're giving you their point of view, and you put yourself in the other perspective of what's the other person's point of view, or what's this point of view, or what other this. So you start to grow this muscle that it's not at face value what it is perceived, right? And the more you do that, again, with little things. And then another exercise to do is to look at elements in your life and the ones and the stories that are constantly popping up of these things that are these wounds that I can't get over. And you say, well, what out of that happened that benefited you, right? And this is an exercise that can be a journaling exercise. What benefited it? Okay, well, this happened and that caused me to be a little bit more independent, or this caused me to do this or that. They could still have that wound, but what positive started to shift? So you start to train the mind to literally go through the process of seeing things differently, right? And the more you do that, it becomes a muscle just like anything else. And it becomes easier and easier to the point where you do it and you have unconscious competence over it. And when you get to that point of having unconscious competence to it, you show up at the airport that canceled your flight, and then your next thought, instead of, it might be, oh man, I'm so disappointed. I was really wanting to go to Costa Rica, or this, and whatever the case may be, right? And you said, this is ruined, and now I'm going to be late for my hotel. And you say, well, maybe, there's a reason. Maybe there's somebody I'm supposed to talk to at the airport, or maybe there's something else that's supposed to happen. Like maybe this allows me to get that work done that I was wanting to get done, or that phone call that I was meaning to do. Okay, let me make use of this, right? And, at first, some people might use it as like a, easy way is to say, well, maybe something would happen to the flight, or maybe something this, but look at about how you can make it personal, right? Because when you can do that, and you say, because at any given moment, the more that you're invested in life, the more you realize, like, I feel like people that are actually living are never bored, because there's a million things they could be doing, learning, or accomplishing at any given moment, right? Whether it's building deeper connections and relationships with the people they love, whether it's some projects or some elements that they have, whether they're wanting to dive into that book that they can't wait to read, or whatever the case may be, right? And so if you can use whatever you had a plan of what you were going to do and it didn't work out, but what did that open for instead? And then it becomes easy. And then the big thing happens. And that really disturbs you, your significant other doesn't show up at the altar and you're embarrassed in front of a whole bunch of people. How do you shift that? Okay, I didn't waste my time and energy marrying somebody that isn't going to be my partner in life. I didn't do this. Okay, what else? Let's look at this. Let's allow yourself to start to do a process of reframing. Again, you're going to be disappointed by life, and nobody's going to be immune to that. There's going to be, because we build expectations, because we plan, right? If we didn't plan, maybe there'd be something different, but we plan. We like to look forward to the future. We get excited about things. But you can choose what you decide. You can either be fear and excitement are the same, almost the same vibration. You can live in fear and it can paralyze you, or you can live in excitement Both are this vibration of, I don't know what to expect for the unknown, and I'm anticipating the unknown, right? Allowing yourself to step a little bit more into those other positive emotions. But by all means, if you're experiencing the negative, you have to ask yourself, it's a learning opportunity. Why are you fearful? What is coming up for that? What are you making that mean about yourself, right? That I'm inadequate, that I'm not going to be okay, that I'm going to be this, that this is the only opportunity, that maybe I'm not really good enough. What are you making it mean about you? Instead of getting caught in that vibration, feel the vibration instead of pushing it away. Why are you, like, emotions are emotions. Like, I dislike how people are like, oh, we should never have negative emotions. If you have pain, like let's say physical pain, that's a signal to your body that something's wrong, right? Maybe you should be stepping on your ankle if it stings, when you try to put pressure on it. Well, same way, if you feel sad, what is that doing to yourself, right? Why are you having that sadness? What are you making that mean? What is that causing? So identify it, feed into it, understand it, and then you can let it go.
I always say, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
Exactly. So when you choose to hold on and to continue to live and with the past over your shoulders and way down and tell yourself these repetitive stories, I don't need to hear like you went through the trauma of your lifetime when you were 10, but you're still living in the trauma of your lifetime today. Isn't it bad enough that that trauma even existed once? Why are you repeating it 1,000 times?
Living through
Right?
it. Yeah, a story that
Yeah.
keeps on going and going. This is very interesting. It's this reframing perspective because people, they don't, I don't think they're, like you said, consciously competent to understand that they have the power to reframe in the current present moment. They get stuck in the story, and the story is what continues to help them stay back into that lower vibration rather than creating that excitement and that certainty, because it doesn't come from anywhere except yourself, and stepping into the next moment
Yeah.
to create the circumstance rather than be a manager of the external. And so how do you, through your book or through what you do and through what you're creating, help individuals step into that level of certainty?
Well, one of the things is to, as you were just saying, help them become aware. Help them to become aware that they're in control and at cause and at power for their life, right? And I like to say with that sometimes can be alarming for people, because people like to claim responsibility for the things that go well, and they do not like to claim responsibility for the things that go wrong. Like to point fingers, and they like to say that was them, or that was this, or I can't believe I got cheated on again by another person, and that they're such an evil person, or why does this always happen to me? And so you got to say, okay, you want to change, you first have to say, where were you at cause for that? Last I checked, you continued to, like let's say for a job, like they're complaining about a job, like, well, you went to school for that, you put in your resume for that, you showed up to probably numerous interviews for that, you continue to show up for work every day. Do you not have any cause in the situation? Yes, it might not be the responsibility that your boss is an asshole, but like, what in you is putting up with it? What in you doesn't feel good enough about yourself that you don't set up better boundaries or better ways of how you navigate through life, or what your life experiences are like, right? So the first thing is we really have to get people into understanding that they're at cause. No more victim, responsibility, right? Even if it's just a slight responsibility, start to have responsibility. And then it's about looking at some of these core wounds that might be going on. What is the underlying script that is filtering? Why are you filtering the world through the things that you are? And one of the easiest exercises for that is anytime you have an expression of an emotion that is what would be perceived as negative, you have to first flip it back to you and say, what am I making this mean about me? Right? And then you say, well, why is that so bad? And if I was like that, what why is that so bad? And you get to a point and you use this chunking process and you get to the point of finding what is really bothering you. Because let's say you go to a restaurant, a friend's supposed to meet you, and 45 minutes go around and you're sitting there at the table by yourself. They don't text, they don't call, they don't let you know. Then they show up and they don't even say sorry, right? And you're fuming inside, right? But if I get that it's easy to project and say that friend's in not caring, that friend's cold, that friend's whatever. But what are you making that mean about you? Maybe that, how dare they? I feel like I'm stupid. Well, what are you making that mean? I feel like then this. Um, Maybe because I don't feel like I'm respected. And then why is not being respected so bad? Because then I'm not seen. Okay, so
Do
you're
you think
feeling
there's
like you're not seen.
something here that I think that there's a moment here that there's a responsibility, like you said, to communicate to your friend, hey, I'm just curious to know, why are you 45 minutes late? I'd love
Well,
to
no,
just be.
yes, I say that, but you're getting caught up in the outward. This is about an internal process that's going on. So you can address what happened with your friend and what happened with how you want to change and navigate things moving forward, but that's not important. What's important is what did you make that mean about you and what wound or what scar was that really triggering? Then, of course, yes, hey, setting some parameters, figuring out what happened with your friend, doing different things. But the bottom line is you got to understand yourself and that it's not about anybody else, because whether it's that friend and you understand their motives, you understand their reaction, you understand their story, there's going to be somebody else that does something. But everybody else is day players in your life. So what are you constantly internalizing, and what is this filter system that you're seeing the world through, right? Because we can have an event happen in front of us and there can be 6 people watching it, and one person finds it funny, one person is offended, one person doesn't even notice it, right? And we all have these different experiences of it. One to trigger somebody to get like sad and they start crying, they can't believe it, whatever. But it's not about what the reasoning is for that event. It's about what is that internal process that is choose how to filter the world. Why is somebody thinking that that's funny? Why is somebody thinking it's sad? Why is somebody getting angry over it? I'm more curious on that, because then I can understand your internal mechanism to start to free yourself. Because if that's not the reaction you want to be having, and if that's not the impulse that you would like, you got to understand it. And if it is, you're a Tony Robbins fan, if it is the impulse that you want, you have to understand maybe the processing behind that so you can match and mirror that over to other areas of your life.
And this is the wheel of life where we're starting to be able to cultivate integrity. And I think, to me, when you know your values, right, and knowing which ones matter most to you, for myself, this is like integrity. If we know how to do one thing to the
Mm-hmm.
absolute most level of highest state of integrity, then we're able to take that and put that into numerous areas of your life. And like you
Yeah.
said, we match and mirror and we implement that into every circumstance so that we can show up in that level of intention. And so I think that when it comes to uh, this way of showing up and liberating yourself, I'd love to understanding your book, because I want to really know how can people kind of get the prologue of it in this like next 2 minutes, and then how they can find out more information, and then where
Yeah.
they can find you about the work that you do, because this is you're doing beautiful work here. So I think it's super important people can find out where you're at and what you're up to.
Oh, thank you. Well, the book is basically taking you through the process of the steps towards understanding how your mind works, taking control and responsibility in life. Then you allow yourself to identify and takes you through steps to identifying some of the core issues, and really about taking you from that to shifting your perspective and releasing judgment to really allowing you to be a beginner in whatever new journey you want to create and have control over that. So it's really a process. The reason why I wrote the book is that at the time a few years ago when I started writing it, I had a tech company and I didn't have time to do one-on-one clients anymore, but I wanted to take them through the process of what I was doing for transformational change. And so I set out and I said, okay, I want people to have the same results going through a simple book, and I don't want it to be too heady. I want people to understand it. I want anybody, no matter where they're at in their self-development, to be able to pick it up and to be easy to get the results that they want, because time is of the essence. This is our life, and you don't want to spend another day trapped in living somebody else's life than yours, right? And so that's what it's all about. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. It'll be an Audible version soon. You can find it's Liberate Yourself. And I also have a couple centers in Los Angeles. We do different transformational work there. I have one, if people are familiar with LA, Los Feliz, and one in Sherman Oaks. I had a third one in Hollywood that we had to close with the pandemic. It was more of like a bigger center that we did a lot of workshops and events, and things change. You got to go with the times. Otherwise, I have a website, ChristinaDam.com, and that's that.
Thank you so much. I'd love to know if you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
I had 3 days left to live. Well, besides telling everybody that I love them, I would definitely be spending time with my dogs and my girlfriend and in nature, somewhere in nature, enjoying the beauty of the world, right? It's, being at harmony, maybe somewhere with the ocean, trees, the ability to connect with this massive, incredible planet that we have.
Amazing. Christina, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your brilliance, your kindness, your generosity. I'm really excited to stay in touch, and I look forward to meeting each other soon. Do you have any last things you want to share?
Just that if anybody is listening to this and you feel that there's something inside of you, or that you can be more than you are, know that you can. And know that it doesn't matter what your story was. You can start to work on it today and shift it. Forget all of whatever you've been holding on to and say, this moment right now, this is the only moment you got. It's never to be repeated. It's like somebody once said to me years ago, you can't step in the same river twice. And you can't live the same day twice. So allow yourself to let go and to be in the now.
Presence.
Thank you.
Much love. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Hey everyone, and thank you so much for listening to The Resilient Minds. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure to go comment and like and follow us on iTunes or Spotify, and please make sure that if you really love this, to share this episode, and make sure that you're inviting all your friends to like it as we continue to unfold what the beauty of our minds does. More importantly, how powerful our heart level of intelligence can be when we combine our heart and our brain together. And more importantly, check out the alignment course that I've created. It's seriously there for you to take advantage of at www.ericbalance.com/alignment. See you on the next show.